All right, we are back. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Solving the People Puzzle, where myself, Francois, your host, interviews and has conversations with industry leaders, thought leaders from the HR and close environments around anything to do with people. And so, Brad, I am very excited to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much, firstly, for joining.
No, thanks for having me, Francois. Great to be here.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm also keen to get into the topic today. It's following a bit of a trend of some of the conversations that we've been having, which I guess is extremely relevant to the overarching conversations that everybody's having at the moment. But before we jump into that, I would love for you to just introduce yourself.
Cool. So my name is Brad Shorkend. I'm the CEO of Still Human. And Still Human is a workplace advisory. We help companies around the world understand how to be better places for human beings to wake up in the morning to go or work remotely, as is the theme, in a world that's gone digital crazy. So how do we build better businesses for humans in a crazy digital world?
Jeez, what a question, what a statement. And I've now come to know you. I've heard you speak. You didn't mention this, so I'm gonna mention it on your behalf. You're also a phenomenal keynote speaker, and you are an author of a book called We Are Still Human and Work Should Not Suck. I really love that right there. And I guess my first question around this would be, what was your experience writing this, and what has been the uptake and the feedback on this topic? Which I guess, when we're really honest, the question then becomes, does your work suck? And are you feeling human in this new world of work that we're in?
So, there were a bunch of questions in there. Let me respond to each of them. The book was a response to, Still Human is about 10 years old. I've been in this space for almost 20 years. I was previously an architect and ran that practice for many, many years. But I now architect people. And the book was a response to the research we were doing, the models we were building, the work we were doing with clients. They kept on saying, have you written the book? Have you written the book? And eventually you succumb to the pressure. Writing a book is an intense exercise. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done hard things. I've climbed the highest mountains on 3 continents. I've done tough stuff. Writing a book, and I co-authored it with my business partner at the time. You want to test a relationship, write a book with somebody. And we survived. But what was really interesting is that book hit the shelves in December of 2018. And if you look at the front cover, it says how to build businesses for human beings in a world that has gone digital crazy. 1 year later, we went into a COVID world that went digital crazy. It's almost like we saw the future. And so that's obviously become a massive theme, and a very relevant theme, because this whole narrative around humaning just dialed up massively, especially with us being so disconnected. And then your question around, does work really suck? Well, it's a big part of our business has been assessing employee experience in order that we could help with that employee experience, how to lead for it, how to build it. And for anybody who wants to find out whether work sucks or what questions they should be asking, they can go over to my website. There's a free 16-question assessment, and I'm not looking for anything in return. I just want to open people's minds up to what's going on in the experience I and the people around me are having. And it's not only a leadership question. It's for every human being who wakes up in the morning to go to work and engage other human beings.
Sure. I picked up on a specific phrase that you mentioned, and I want to deep dive into that. And you mentioned something about humans and their current experience. What, in your opinion, Brad, is the current experience, October 2022, post this pandemic craziness that we had? And I know that the audience and people that we engage with, they don't want to speak about the pandemic anymore. And so, audience, this topic is not going to be about the pandemic. But when we zoom into this phrase around focusing on the human experience, what exactly does that entail?
So, business is ultimately by humans, with humans, for humans. Technology is just a tool. We live in the very privileged era now where we have incredible technology and we really need to be leveraging it. But it's still by humans, with humans, for humans. So when we wake up in the morning, we go off to engage with human beings. And engage doesn't mean back in the office. It means we're engaging, we're with each other. And what's happened is that because we have a new way of being, which the pandemic showed us, a very distributed way of engaging globally, even between suburbs, nationally, it doesn't matter. We've had to develop and evolve our skill sets, because we can't expect that the human need state changes, but our ability to engage it doesn't. and the need state has changed. It's as simple as that. We as human beings have realized that what we need and what we want is different, and we're all unique. So if we bring it back to where the complexity lives right now, so the current human need state or the current human experience at work is confused, is uncertain, and is more negative than positive. That's what I'm experiencing working with human beings all day, every day. And I'm saying that as a cautious generalization because I also see amazing certainty, positivity, enthusiasm, creativity, and very importantly, care. Because if the time we've been through showed us one thing, it was that we needed to dial up our ability to actually care. So those are the headlines for now of what's going on.
Fantastic. I agree with you. And this conversation that we've been having, there's been one or two podcasts around, do you know who you're working with and why? Is AI and machines coming to take our jobs? These are kind of the narrative at the moment. But just circling back to a couple of things that you said, the before and after emotional experience, where I'm at. Is it fair to say that pre-pandemic, it was the opposite of those three emotions you just described? Or has this always been this dichotomy for people around a certain group feels this, a different group feels that, or has it now been amplified?
I think if we assess the before and after, before, I think we were, as a general, even leaders or employees, I think that the employee or the workforce was largely unconscious. I think we didn't know what we didn't know because we'd had nothing to jolt our consciousness, nothing to take us into a kind of a shock awakening, where we now suddenly started to become more aware of what's going on for us, what matters to us, what we're experiencing. We became more in touch with our feelings as a general workforce. So I think unconscious is how I would have described back then. We were just going through the motions, and things were evolving, and we moved with progress a little bit slowly. Suddenly, boom, big global moment, and we were forced to do things that we didn't previously believe we actually had time to do. We had to work it out fast and reorganize. Now, come close to 3 years forward, I think that consciousness is heightened, deeply amplified. The biggest descriptor I would put out there is the contrast between employee desire and leadership denial. And I think that's, for me, where the tension lives right now. Because it involves work. The real work is having to be done by leaders. Leaders are actually having to lead. And a lot of leaders don't enjoy when I say it's now your time to lead. You were cruising before. You were kind of going through the motions, but it didn't have deep intentionality. And again, blanket statement, I also see incredible leadership out there. But that's where the crack is at the moment, because the perception is that COVID's behind us, the world's gone back to how it was, we can just go back to how we were. But human beings have not gone back to how they were, and that's the glitch.
I love this comment around consciousness because it's so interesting for me to observe, and also at times disheartening that we need a big aha moment to wake us up. The intention isn't necessarily there from individuals on an awareness level to go, I don't have to wait for a pandemic or trauma or an event to wake me up. But that's what COVID did. COVID, as much as it was really bad for the world, there were some positives around it. Digital transformation, accelerating the need for technology. And then also this idea of, wait a minute, I have a decision to make. I have choice. And awakening and awareness is definitely a theme and a topic that many authors and keynote speakers are speaking about now, especially when we circle back to the speed and the rate of which technology is, coming into the workforce. I say this often, we aren't, in the world, the new world of work. The new world of work isn't coming, we're there already. It isn't, the fourth industrial revolution is not coming, we're there already. Machines aren't coming to take our jobs, they are already in some instances. And so, this need for a higher level of awareness, being in touch with your emotions, understanding where you are emotionally is just becoming increasingly important. You spoke about the idea of tech on the one end, Brad, and then also the better human experience on the other that comes with this awareness and those emotions. Let's just deep dive for the audience into those two elements for a second.
So if you have a look at you spoke about the speed of advancement of technology, Francois, the big narrative, everywhere I went, and I teach in business schools, and everywhere I went, everybody was speaking about, and I kept seeing that slide of the singularity, that curve of when technology was going to overtake human learning and all that, and it was going to be Terminator and all these crazy ideas. But nobody saw what was going to happen. That curve went like this. It was just insane what actually happened. And I think for me, the world, and I agree with you, some terrible outcomes because of the pandemic, but the world needed the shaking up of, hold on, technology is real. As you said, it's behind us already. We're living in it. It's not coming. Fourth Industrial Revolution and AI, we're right in it. Now, what that means is that the big theme for me is one of relevance. We need businesses and human beings, and survival is based in relevance. If you're not relevant, it's going to be very hard to find a means to existing. And so the first thing that any human being needs to be doing is having a look at, well, what is it that's going to make me relevant? And if we have a look at where technologies are being extremely well utilized to replace, human jobs, but this is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on right back into when the advent of the first machines and wheels and all these sorts of things that came into existence. So it's not a new thing. The only difference is it's now much faster. But the other big difference, now there's two dynamics. So yes, technology is replacing some of what human beings do because technology does it better. So if you want to be relevant, don't try to be competing with a machine that can count faster than you can, compute faster than you can, and do all those things that you can't do as a human being. That's not going to give you relevance. But there's a whole lot of stuff, human competencies that live in the aspects of critical thinking, of deep empathy, of curiosity, that machines can apply to a very base limit as much as they are programmed to do. But they don't have the intuition of a human being. That's a whole different skill set. That is where human relevance lives. So every single human being now needs to be accessing the highest levels of those competencies that are available to them. Because that then gives you not a task-based skill set, but a human skill set that you can apply across the board. And when you have that in your toolbox, suddenly you become very relevant. The beauty is we have so much access to learning content, to free online and on-demand education. No one has an excuse for being left behind. No one has an excuse because it's free.
Yeah. So many golden nuggets in there. Let me try and circle back and just emphasize a couple for the audience. So I think the first thing you mentioned, and this was right at the beginning of the episode, was this questionnaire that is on your website, where you can actually go and ascertain and understand where you're at, or where your organization's at, or your experience in your organization. Now, when I met you at the event we both spoke at, you shared this crazy story around Google. And when I type in my job makes me, or
my
I
job
am,
makes me. Yeah.
So the feedback.
Sorry, I was interrupting.
And so the feedback then surprised you. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I want to start linking this to that assessment and then going into the competency conversation.
Okay. So when we started researching for the model we were building, where the research started is Andy, my co-author and ex-business partner, she's immigrated and is playing in some different spaces now. But we had a shared curiosity that started out as a passion project. We wanted to understand, what do the best companies around the world to work for obsess about getting right and invest in terms of the human experience in their businesses? They believe that if you invest in these things, you'll get the best discretionary effort out of human beings. And that's ultimately where you get business deliverables, is get switched on human beings. You're going to get results. You're going to get innovation. You're going to get better delivery in all the areas that matter. It makes sense. So we started a bit of a research exercise and an observation exercise, and we were stalking businesses all over the world. We were finding them in articles. We were finding them on the best place to work for lists. And we were just connecting with them. And we were asking them, so what do you focus on obsessively? And we were building this model, this list of, we were looking for 5. We believed that 5 would be the holy grail. 5 became 7, 7 became 12. And we then went back to them all and we said, well, which of these can we remove? Because it feels cumbersome. And the feedback we got was none of them. They all matter. That question that we asked, the one about my job makes me, during this research exercise, we also did a little bit of Googling and we came across one article that said, type something in and see what the most searched prompts are around that statement. And if you type in "my job makes me," it gives you all of the most searched prompts. And the most searched prompts are "my job makes me anxious, cry, suicidal, depressed, angry, drink,
miserable,
and so you go. And this is not, now obviously, AI and algorithms are working there, but it just paints a somber story. But if you ask around, that's not an untrue story. Is people,
Sure.
and it's much worse now than it was before COVID, because of what's going on in terms of the way leaders and companies have not understood the current human need state, or the new human need state. So those numbers are way worse. And then you asked about the assessment. The assessment, so those 12 essentials, we call those the 12 essentials of a company behaving awesomely. And those are the 12 human experience touch points that you need to be dialing the quality of the experience up in them. And obviously, there's much more to this, but they're available on the website as well, but there's a lot more complexity around it. But what we did is we used to deliver with our clients a very robust, very expensive assessment, hundreds of questions, months of interviewing, to produce a report that told them this is what's going on in your employee experience all over the business.
In relation to the 12 behaviors?
In relationship to the 12 essentials. So based on those human experience touchpoints and much more. And this was a very expensive process. It took 3 to 4 months to complete, and which meant we only started doing the shift work, working on the culture, working on the leadership narratives and the style and the story 4 months in, or maybe even 6 months after they first contacted us. And I made a big decision earlier this year. I decided to remove the serious money generator out of my business, because I'm not, it sounds all holier than thou, I'm not trying to be that. For me, I realized, firstly, the report was exactly the same with every business we went to, same problems.
Because people irrespective of how you went about gathering the research. Yep.
Same problems, subtle nuances, but you can pick those up as you go. I realized I actually wanted to be diving in, getting my hands dirty from week 1, not from 4, 5, 6 months in, because the pain was immediate. You know, you can't take a cancer patient and say, well, we're going to do a whole lot of tests for the next 6 months and we'll start working. They'll be dead.
Yeah.
So I adopted the same approach. Let's get stuck in and we'll learn as we go, but let's start to move stuff around. So what I did is I redesigned that assessment to be free on the website. And what it does is it prompts people's thinking very quickly. It takes 5 minutes to, this is the experience you're having. So it asks you only about your own, but then it shares with you the experience that other people might be having as well, based on what you've shared. And that's it, quick and easy.
Okay. Now, if I was in the audience, and this podcast is all around practical tools and tips, you know, we want to leave the audience, ultimately this is about value, and we want to leave the audience with something that they can go and do straight away. So if I was in the audience, my first question would be, or my thinking, and with this is without putting you on the spot, author, is what are those 12? Can you name them?
I can. I'd have to go through, but they are meaningful communication. They are shared purpose. They are innovation. Probably going to repeat myself here. They are innovation with intent. They are knowledge flow. They are people push. They are stoke, which is wow moment to bring people back for more. They are. I need to get more coffee in my brain. Trying to visualize.
No, it's good.
There's so many of
them. Don't worry. The audience, go to the website, go and do the assessment. That was on the spot, Brad. Sorry. I'm happy that you could mention a few, because it leads perfectly into the next part of the conversation, and that is that every single one of those phrases, one hears or experiences human experience. There's interaction, there's a touch point, there's an emotion, there's a connection, and so we have the tech. Don't fight it, work with it, but understand that the tech only takes us to this far. And then from here, we need to be that human. And organizations can then start zooming into these 12 behaviors. And then there are development programs and knowledge resources around these 12. I can imagine on an individual, group, and organization level to move you forward.
Yep. So they're not actually behaviors, they're experience touch points. And this is where I've chosen a very unique approach, because there are millions of behavior-based learning businesses out there. Still Humans' unique differentiator, very deliberately, is we go to the essence of the moment that the experience happens. So there's a moment in which meaningful communication is happening. There's a descriptor for what makes it meaningful. But now where this gets really interesting in the way, and I'm happy to share all of this, openly. Where it gets really interesting is, okay, so you'd have a look at what creates that moment of communication is meaningful and is a high quality human experience. Because that moment is going to either switch somebody on or off, amplify their experience or reduce their experience. And that then has a ripple effect in terms of their psychology. It breaks the safety or enhances the safety. Other people are seeing it, so it has a ripple effect into the culture. It also impacts other moments, because if meaningful communication is low, I guarantee you knowledge flow will be low, innovation with intent will be low. One of the other ones I didn't mention is gas, which is give a shit. That is the biggest one that's unfolded, is the gas. How high is the gas? And it's company gassing and people gassing. Reason to care, full on.
Yes.
So it looks at those touch points, but then it gets even more interesting, because meaningful communication might look a certain way in terms of behavior in the legal area of the business, and it might look very different in the customer-facing side of the business. And then what does it look like as a leadership competency? So then what it does is our method, we can apply any competency-based learning process into the how you create experience. And that's where I'm finding it works really well with our clients, because a lot of organizations have already got their competency learning frameworks in place. We don't replace, they slide in. And that's where it becomes really powerful, because then people know what are they behaving into.
I love that. Before we started building Wamly, as an organizational psychologist, I was consulting and I was involved in various projects around building competency frameworks, embedding behaviors as part of a culture initiative, etc. And one of the biggest issues I always had with this is, it's one thing to have the behavior as a list or a beautiful model, but it never ties really into what am I experiencing as an employee, and what is the experience that gets created intentionally by the organization. And very often we don't even think about this. And so we have this sense, this intuitive sense, that our values or our culture is not really in line with how we want to behave. And maybe one of the reasons is we don't really consider or ever think about the experiences.
Absolutely. I think an important thing there is, and watching, obviously having access to Wamly and seeing you do your thing in person as well as in your social channels, and what you do exceptionally is you've worked out what the experiences you want to create. I've seen it, and you are, even more importantly, you are consistent. You are incredibly consistent, which tells me something. It tells me you've worked your story out. And for me, that's where the magic sits. I've been through a huge rebuild of my business strategy, and anyone who goes to my website will see the first thing it tells you is this is about how you build your story. It's about building your story, leading your story, living your story. But it's very hard to lead and live if you haven't worked your story out. And that's where so many businesses get it wrong. And part of your story is what is the experience we're creating, both inside and outside our business. That's where longevity and relevance sits.
And firstly, thank you. Appreciate that. Secondly, couple of conversations since the HR in Indaba leading into our podcast today has been around employee value proposition, has been around how do we attract. I mean, we have these phrases, the great resignation, war for talent, brain drain, it goes on, silent quitting, etc., etc., etc. But ultimately, it comes back to, in this craziness, with all the technology, trying to be human, how do I attract? How do I select, and how do I retain talent? That's for us. When Mark Sham asked me that question at our event, what is our people puzzle that we're trying to solve? It's that. In a nutshell, it's that. And so what would your take be as we land the plane, Brad, around attraction and retention in this experience conversation where we are still human?
So those in that research exercise that we did, we coined a phrase, a CBA, and a CBA is a company behaving awesomely. And a company behaving awesomely is a company to which the best people want to come, choose to stay at, and while they're working there, they shoot the lights out. And the only reason somebody should ever choose to leave you is because an opportunity comes up somewhere else that you just can't compete with. But should that opportunity come up in your business, they want to come back. Where the magic starts here is in when I said you become a company that the best people want to come to and choose to come to. There are two critical things there. They're going to want to come because they hear incredible things. That internal narrative is because people who work there are having a great time. You know, you hear stories about that's a great place to work from the people. They choose to come because when they go through an interview process, the experience that they have aligns with what they heard. And that's where I think, and if we take use of technology, okay, so it's technology and social media and whatnot creates awareness and conversation, but the first touch points are when somebody makes contact. What's the very first moment of contact, whether it's your website, whether it's a phone call coming in to you, whether it's a mailer, that first moment sets the scene, and then what happens after that? The interview process, I mean, obviously a space of expertise for you. And what you guys obviously focus on intensely is how do you create that both sides, all the touch points are at the highest level of efficiency and human experience. And that's what you're innovating constantly. This is what I mean by technology with a human intention. Your intention is not to replace what a human's doing. It's in order that the best person can get the job or can be made eligible for the job in the best way possible for the people inside the organization to have the best experience, as well as the person outside who's going through the process. And so many organizations get it wrong right there. I know people who wait months and months and months for feedback and for response. They're trying to make big life decisions, and somebody sitting in HR is just too busy to bother. That's where it's that's where the game starts. Then, in that value proposition, give them an amazing experience. Be intentional around creating an amazing internal experience, and that's about leadership. Great story and lead the story. That's what it's all about.
Sure. I love that. And if you are in HR listening to this right now, again, we are continuously iterating how incredibly important and what a phenomenal opportunity it is for you to actually have a direct, real impact in this. Touch points, experiences, start to end, that very first engagement, how you continue that, how you leave that individual, even when they weren't or aren't successful, that feedback loop, closing the feedback loop. Because ultimately, Brad, I might be unsuccessful in applying for a role, but still be really excited around the experience and what that did for me. And then I become your brand out there, sharing that message, creating that story. And so that consistency around what I hear and what I experience, I love that you said that needs to be consistent. I'm so bummed because I would love to just go on for the next 3 hours here with you. We are definitely getting you back on this podcast because we've just scratched the surface. I can imagine audience are having questions around Brad saying that leaders need to actually lead. I would love to know what you say or have to say around that, because I agree. I listened to a podcast the other day of someone speaking about leadership fatigue and leaders being really exhausted since this pandemic struck. There's been just an emphasis on leadership. And even this most recent topic we just discussed about hiring and attracting, there's a lot of emphasis on what the organization can do, but my first question then also becomes, what's the responsibility of the individual and the employee around being awesome 100%. And performing? But Brad, thank you. This was phenomenal insights, great wisdom. I would love to leave the audience with a call to action. Where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you if they are more interested in this?
Easiest is, and thank you for having me. It's been a very brief, as you said, we could go on for hours conversation, and we will. Again, I would love to pick up that leadership conversation. It's a big one because leaders are people too. Leaders are people too.
Yes. That's our title, by the way, Mr. Producer, for the next one. Leaders are people too. Thank you.
And where people can connect with me if they want to do the assessment or learn a bit more is at the website. It's www.stillhuman.co.za. All my contact details are there if they want to make contact.
Fantastic.
And I'm very happy to answer questions, share, see what possibilities exist. Be
Wonderful.
human.
Wonderful. Brad, thank you so much for sharing, for really opening up some big conversations, some relevant things that we need to be discussing. I think, maybe we can leave the audience with this. COVID did accelerate a lot of things, but it also opened up conversations that we weren't having. And exposing certain realities, facts, areas in the business, especially around humans, that definitely needs attention. So thank you so much.
That's
We
it.
will pick this up again. Appreciate your time, and we'll chat soon.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care. Cheers, everyone.
Take care. Cheers, everyone.